would like to introduce to you all our next speaker. I've had the pleasure of working with and meeting Sydney Rogers. She is the Executive Director of Alignment Nashville. Sydney completed a 30-year career in higher education with Nashville State Community College in 2005, retiring from the college as the Vice President of Community and Economic Development. During her tenure there, she was a faculty member, a department chair, and Dean of Technology and Executive Vice President. While at the college, she led a 10-year effort to develop collaborative workforce development initiatives with support and funding from the National Science Foundation, where she founded the Regional Center of Information and Technology and the Case Files Project. While at Nashville State, she developed the design of the Tennessee Board of Regents online degree program. She has served on many local and national profit boards or nonprofit boards and the NSF National Visiting Committee. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Sydney Rogers.
Thanks for that great introduction, and I am so happy to be here. I feel right at home. You already heard that I kind of grew up at the community college, so right here is very comfortable for me. Also, some of you know that I was, as a child, my grandparents had a winter home in Winter Haven, and so I came here every winter, and my grandfather didn't drive, so every day he and I walked to the Publix there on Lake Silver in Winter Haven. And since my grandparents didn't drive, whenever we came to town, we took them over to Haines City or Lakeland or wherever. So this all just feels really at home to me, and I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me. And by the way, Publix is my favorite store in Bellevue as well, so where I live. Okay, you heard about Alignment Nashville, and when I was hearing your new superintendent, Kathy, talk about the ideas of involving the community and how involved your community is, I thought this is just going to really hit home for you, because that is what this does. You know, you're going to hear in just a minute about how we did this. We had the same problem in Nashville, and I'll tell you, when I was 30 years at the community college, and I was really looking for something different to do, so I said, well, you know what I'd like to do is go to Florida and live on the beach. And so I found a job in Jacksonville at the community college, and they said, the people who started this said, well, we'd like for you, since you're retiring, we'd like for you to stay here and do this. This was almost 10 years ago. And when they explained it to me, and I'd been helping them kind of design it, I said, you want me to do what? I mean, I thought that I knew how to do a lot of things, having done what I'd done in my career. But what they were asking me to do was really different. It was about making that community involvement with the public schools be strategic and systemic. And I really didn't have a clue how to do that, and really didn't know anybody else who did either. But they were very persuasive. I ended up not buying a beach house in Jacksonville and staying in Nashville. So this is what you're going to hear is what happened over that next 10 years. Am I too close on the, is this too loud? Is it okay? Can you hear me okay? All right. Okay, Alignment Nashville. And I also, this is a new slideshow that my team has put together, and it says Alignment USA. You'll hear what that is too in just a few minutes. We have a few other communities who are adopting these principles and processes and creating a network called Alignment USA. That's what that little logo is all about. So let me talk to you about what happened in Nashville. In Nashville, just a little bit about our district. Total population, 624,000. Now, the metropolitan area is more like 1.6 million. This is just in Nashville and Davidson County. And it's it was actually the first in the country to be city and county government merged in the 1960s. But we have 81,000 students, 142 schools, 76 elementary, 47 middle, 22 high schools. A lot of those high schools are specialty high schools. We've got 12 comprehensive, what used to be called comprehensive high schools, 3 alternative schools, 4 special ed, and I believe that number of charters is greater now, but I don't really know what it is, sorry. So in 2002, when this started, and I was still at the community college until 2005, and I was vice president, the president had assigned me to work with this group who was working on this problem. We had over 175 nonprofits who were working with the schools. The number was really more than 200, we think. Nonprofits being, and in that bucket, I'm going to include post-secondary, the community college. We were one of them. We were working with the schools, the universities, government, civic agencies, juvenile court, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, YMCA. You probably have your own, I'm sure you have your own list, probably the same list, and some others. But there was no overall coordination. On any Monday morning, a principal who's sitting in a school building is going to get a call from this nonprofit. Well, hey, I'm from the YMCA, and I've got a student leadership program and a character education program. Hey, I'm from Big Brothers, Big Sisters. I want to mentor your kids. Hey, I'm from Senior Citizens. I want to read to your kids. Hey, and all of it really, really good. Large amount of money being expended, lots of volunteers, some paid, some were paid and some were volunteers. People in goodwill, resources were being consumed. And this is still happening to some degree, but not nearly like it was then. So overall, we calculated, and the superintendent, who was Dr. Pedro Garcia at the time, calculated that overall it was an administrative drain. And that was really at the height of No Child Left Behind. So there was a real focus on just targeting academics, and it was sort of like the district office had adopted the attitude of, everybody else just get out of our way. We know what we're doing. We just have to fix the academics, and we don't need your help in fixing the academics. And so they'd really pushed the community out of the schools because they didn't have the resources. The principals and their staffs did not have the resources to deal with all these people, even though it was all wonderful stuff. But there's another problem with it too. It wasn't very strategic. There's nothing wrong with coming in and reading to kids. That definitely helps. There's nothing wrong with bringing cookies. Well, they're the right kind of cookies, I guess. There's nothing wrong with fixing a banner for a football game or whatever kinds of activities the partners in the community were doing. Those are all good things. They're very supportive. But could they be better focused? Could they be more strategic? Could they really help with some long-term goals? If there was a systematic way of doing it, we thought so, but we didn't really know how. So I pulled out some, I went back to, because I'm starting to do this more, and I'm realizing that many communities are really kind of in the early stages of doing this, what we call collective impact work. And these are some of the things we started with, some of these quotes and ideas about the concepts so that we could solidify them in our community. The problems facing our cities seem to defy solution, but the only certainty is that the increasingly complex challenges exceed the capabilities of any single sector, public, private, or nonprofit, to solve them alone. That's Drucker Leadership Series. So we had an opportunity, and we didn't really know what on earth to do. But in 2002, we knew we had an opportunity to impact school performance, and we used that word impact. Later, in 2007, I think Stanford published an article called Collective Impact, and that's what we said we were starting to do back in 2002. We just didn't know how. But we knew we could impact school performance. It could be powerful if we could get all of this aligned, all of the community aligned. So we start out with this mission statement. Well, we didn't actually start with this mission statement. This is a little bit modified, but we started with something similar, that we would align community organizations and resources so that their coordinated support of Nashville's youth has a positive impact on public school success. What we added later was children's health and the success of our community as a whole. And so for our organization, it was about community prosperity. It's about economic development. But it's about that being the reason why we want an educated citizenry. Okay, I don't know if this is going to work. It's a video. I didn't have a chance to test it, so just a second. Let me see here. I guess not. Well, anyway, I'll just tell you what I was going to say on the video. I was just giving you a little bit of a change up. But Basically what I say there is that there was a group of city leaders who started this. It started out of our Chamber of Commerce. We had some very forward-thinking business people. Back in 2002, our chamber was one of the first in the year to have formed education committees around public education. And we had two back-to-back chamber leaders who were actually CEOs and chairmen of international companies, very large companies. And they said, you know, and they were bringing their business minds to this problem, right? And there's all this conflict about, you know, we need to run like a business, or the schools say, well, we know how to do education. But really what we found is if you bring them both together and use the best of each, you can really come up with some great solutions. So these guys said, we need a solution around this, and we don't know what it looks like, but we're going to try to find out. So they hired a consultant from Colorado. His name was Doug Zimmerman. And what he did was came in and interviewed executives across the city. He spent about a year doing that. And he came back with a recommendation and I was one of those people, because I was at the community college at the time. He came back with a recommendation, I remember this day, a year later, that we really needed to create some way to get these organizations aligned and get them working together. But he was very adamant that it should not be a separate organization, and it should not have any structure to it. It should happen very organically. So the business guys in the room, they said, well, thank you very much, Mr. Zimmerman. Goodbye. We appreciate it. We'll send you a check. They sent him out the room, and they said that was the craziest thing we ever heard. Because the first part they agreed with, but the second part they said anybody who's ever done anything and done it successfully knows you have to have structure. You have to have people who get up every day and do this work. It can't just happen. And in the last 10 years, what I've observed about that is that there are coalitions, collaboratives that pop up across the country, and if they have really good leadership, and while they have very good leadership, because that waxes and wanes, they are often fairly effective. But if you take that as a whole, this is just an observation, I don't have any research on it, but if you take it as a whole, I think that only happens about less than 50% of the time. It's sort of hit or miss. But if you're deliberate about it, if you're deliberate and you bring, a specific structure to bear on issues and you stay at it, just like anything else, just like building a business, it will work. So you're going to get about 90 to 95% effectiveness. So why wouldn't you do that? So that's what they did when they created Alignment Nashville. Okay, I'm going to let you take this one in for just a second. So it's like, when an instrument, an orchestra, an instrument, if a violin is playing a song that was written just for a violin, it's beautiful. If a violinist is playing a part in a symphony that is just the part of the symphony, it's still pretty, but it's not until you put it all together with the score, which is the strategy, which is the score, that you really have beautiful music, right? So that's sort of the same idea. Each institution is autonomous, so each organization, whether it's your community college, your university, your nonprofit, your Big Brothers, your YMCA, or whatever it is, and your school district, each one has to do its own work the way each instrument in an orchestra plays only its own part. But there's also the score. It's the community. And only if each individual instrument contributes to the score is there music. Otherwise, there's only noise. And this is about the score. That's a Drucker quote. And I'll show you this. You can't read this. I've been meaning to get this slide redone, so I'm going to read this to you. This says the school district's goals and objectives. And this is just the coordinator. It's just the coordination of all of those different parts. And what that is meant to represent is this. Our business leaders who founded Alignment Nashville, they were big Jim Collins, still are, Jim Collins good to great followers. And basically they said, and we had this happen in Nashville, and honestly traveling all over the country, I've seen this nearly everywhere I go. I haven't seen it here, but I haven't been here much. But there is criticism, especially up in the north, a lot of criticism of the school district. The community just simply criticizes them, and they don't really, it's not very helpful. And so if you're a Good to Great follower, you know that, you got to figure out who's driving the bus here. And if you're talking about kids and education, it's the school district. It's the superintendent and the school board. And what they said, and they stood up in Rotary in front of 400 leaders and said, we have to get on that bus. Quit criticizing them and get on the bus and help them. It's they who are going to decide where we're going, and we're going to do what they say. As it turned out, they did. That's exactly what happened. And as it turned out over time, in the last 10 years, what's happened is that we've had a couple of new superintendents. But when they've brought in the new superintendents, the vision and the mission and the drive for what we've done has been so strong that the people that they've interviewed and brought in were completely on board. And that's been one of our problems in education is you come in and you get a new person and they start everything all over again, and there's not enough time for any traction, for anything to take any traction. So everybody in the community aligning behind the school district is a key critical factor in making this work. I watched this in Rockford, Illinois. They're the first community that became an alignment community after us. In fact, my board said, we're paying you to work on Nashville. We were starting to get calls 4 or 5 years ago from communities to help them. And the people in Rockford just were hounding us. And finally, I went up there and observed this. As soon as I landed on the plane, got in the hotel, turned on the news, there's news stories about pointing fingers at the superintendent and pointing fingers at the school board and the district, and there's these squabbles, and and it was, oh my goodness. And so we went through this process of helping them to develop their alignment process. 2 years later, I go back, it's like this love fest. It's like, whoa, what's happened? Now, that's not to say there aren't still issues. There are always people who don't, come along. But it's an amazing. It was just, if as an outsider, I could observe that. As an insider in Nashville, I was sort of like, I think this is happening, but I'm not sure. But it's easier as an outsider to see what's going on in a community. So here's a little bit of the history of what happened in Nashville. In 2002, I already kind of went over most of this, so I'll do it fast. The Chamber did its study. Let me see, is there a pointer on here? No. Chamber did its study. They agreed that there should be alignment, and they created this operating framework. In 2003 and 2004, I was still at the community college then. We launched the initial key strategic goals with the school district goals. There was no full-time staff then. We're trying to figure out how to do that. In 2005, I came on in January. We actually launched the first set of pilots. And I'll tell you, the academies of Nashville, you may have heard about that, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute, were not in that first set. The first set of high school strategies that we launched was a leadership development context for all these leadership programs. We had a weekend program, a retreat program, all these different agencies were going to create leaders out of the high school kids, and that was great, but each one of them was impacting about 10 kids. So I'll tell you how this happened a little bit later, but basically they launched a program to try to target the kids that were leading gangs and turn them into positive leaders, and we've got some really good data around that I'll share with you momentarily. In 2007, we actually started working on it in 2006. Our high school committee worked on the whole idea of academies, and it wasn't about just creating academies. Much like what I know you've done here, it was about creating academies in which they're owned by the whole community, that the business community, the nonprofits, everybody is supporting those academies. So that was the design. It was a very comprehensive design, and it was our proposal to the U.S. Department of Education was wall to wall, because we had tried some academies before and they worked, but they worked so well actually that we knew that we wanted every kid to have that opportunity. And I'll talk a little bit more about the business engagement and how we did that systematically. It's now, just as we wanted it to be, taken over by the Chambers and the Pencil Foundation. They actually manage that on a daily basis. The Alignment Committee just oversees that. One of the things that happened right after we got started was we realized we really need to reach parents, and we need to reach them in a systematic way, so we created a parent university committee, which is now the Parent Engagement Committee. They've done some phenomenal things. Later, we added refugee and immigrant support services because we have a lot of refugees and immigrants in our town, and they were not getting consistent services, and they're the ones who have language issues and things that we needed to most address. Now, in 2010, 2012, we've developed working with the Coalition for Community Schools, a model for an enterprise-level community school system. Usually, if you're familiar with community schools, some of you may be, it's an individual kind of place-based, and this is a network across the district version of community schools. And then this year, we've launched Alignment USA. So some of our results. Okay, high school committee initiated the Academies of Nashville, initiated the Developing Community Leaders is what it was called, to engage all of the organizations around leadership for kids. I don't remember what year the data started now, I've lost track, but it seems like 82.9% graduation rate overall was 2011. Or it could have been 2010. But 4 years before was the first cohort of freshman academies, the first year that we started with our academies wall to wall. And that year, our evaluator, we had a almost $7 million grant for small learning communities from the Department of Education that our committee had written for and gotten for the school district. And the dramatic increase happened in that last year from 71% to 82, almost 83%, almost an 11% increase in 1 year in high school graduation. And it was that cohort that we started with in the beginning in the freshman academies. These numbers aren't the current numbers. Let me tell you what happened. 2 years ago, the year after we had that 82.9%, the state went to calculating it on a 4-year rate instead of a 5-year rate. And so that caused the rate to drop to 78% or something, but if you did an equivalent comparison, it was the same. And it's on a positive trajectory. I don't have those current numbers, but on the teen pregnancy in Nashville, has reduced 25.5%. There have been numerous over the last 6 years efforts focused at preventing teen pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases and things like that. You probably know this, but it may not happen in Polk County, but in Nashville, sometimes there are as many as 25 to 50 kids in any high school who are pregnant and parenting and who are dropping out of school. Now, it's not the number one reason that they drop out of school, but it's most definitely a contributing factor, and if we can keep those kids in school. So you'll see in a minute about how this kind of ended up happening, but that percentage that you're seeing is the highest. It's way higher than any other community in Tennessee, and it's one of the highest in the nation. There's a national trend in improvement in teen pregnancies, reduction of teen pregnancies, but ours is one of the highest. It is the highest in Tennessee. The school district asked us to help them focus on school nutrition because we have problems with obesity, we have problems with children not eating and not being able to concentrate in school. All of these things contribute to their success. And guess what? We have an 86% increase in the number of fresh produce items served in our pilot schools. We haven't expanded across all the district yet because that just started a couple of years ago, but it's in the process. Parent University, we'd love to be able to tie the participation in Parent University to actual student results, grades. We haven't been able to do that yet, but we have some what we call outputs, which is we know how many parents participate and what they think about it, and 100% say it's absolutely beneficial for them. Social emotional learning. We have a committee focused on social emotional learning, behavioral health, and that started about 5 years ago, way before there was a focus on that in the country, and now we've started to see a lot of improvement in our referrals to alcohol and drug abuse, you name it. And a group called CASEL, Center for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, that is funded by, I think, Warren Buffett's foundation, has cited Nashville as one of the dozen that they are coming into to use as models for social emotional learning. Average age of gang members. I told you about our Developing Community Leaders initiative that came out of the high school to begin with, targeting those kids. We over the course of the 4 or 5 years, I think there were more than 1,500 young people who were, many of them, most of them, were hanging out with gangs, and they were actually natural leaders and looking for ways to become leaders, and taking all of the nonprofits, like the YMCA had a program, a group called Oasis Center, all of those together, and have them working in the schools and having this in every school. We weren't able to follow that to know for sure exactly what contributed, but we know that we impacted at least 1,500 kids that were going in a negative direction. And guess what? Last year, the police department reported to us that they don't know what explains it, but they said in the last 5 years, the average age of the gang members in Nashville has risen from 16 years of age to 22 years of age. So we know that there were multiple factors contributing to that, one of which is academies, for sure, because it engages the kids. So these are some of the results. I want to take you for a moment to our annual report, which is in front of you, and ask you to turn to page 10. And because I get asked all the time, well, what are your results? What are your results? Well, I'm giving you some of them. And in every page in that report, after about page 10 or 12, there are 2 pages per each committee, there's some kind of data in there, some kind of data point in there, and depending on, you'll understand this better in a minute, depending on where in the cycle of this work this committee is, the data point might be about, results, but it might be about current status as well. But if you look on page 10, you see that it says collective impact equal power to change. And you've got some goals there, some big goals there, and those are we call that's our end game. That's really what we're looking to come out with. Yours, as I understand it, are produce a globally competitive workforce, improve school grades, exceed state graduation rates, and improve economic impact and reduce unemployment rates. Did I get that right? That's your end game. So here's what we have to do. As a community, we have to quit working in silos, and we have to all work towards the same end game. That means that even our pre-K committee has put down as one of their goals high school graduation rates. That's their end game. And if you look through our annual report on each page, those little icons for those long-term goals are on each page. I think the pre-K committee chose all of them. Every one of the committees has to choose those, and then every month they have to report against progress made. But it's not about, I was talking to a group of business people in Louisville about a couple of months ago, and, excuse me just a second, I took an Allegra this morning, and it's, I need to get some water. Okay, I was talking to a group of business people in Louisville about a month ago. It was interesting because we're working in Ford NGL there as well. And helping them, we were working on how to do what we call tactical planning and how to tie it into your in-game goals. And the superintendent up there is kind of new too. She's only been there about a year, and when we first started talking to her, she said, when I came into this city, I got a lot of pressure from the business community about results. You need results like this year. You need results now. She said, it's like I have a cheetah on my back. And there's some commercial on TV about, she said, do you all know what, I haven't seen, of course, because I hardly ever watch TV, but there's something about a cheetah, it's a kid with a cheetah on their back or something. She said, I feel like I have a cheetah on my back. And so I was in this room with all these business people, and they were working on Strand 3, and you all know what that is, maybe. Some of you know what Strand 3 is. If you don't, you will. It's about how to engage the community. And we were working on writing really goals and tactics. What can we do? And, the whole point was if we, and they were very insistent, we need to do something where we can get results right away. I said, okay. If you fix the sophomores, if you do some academies or you do something with your 10th graders this year, which you can't do it this year, it's going to take a year to get it in place. If you put that in place next year, then tell me, when are you going to know whether those kids graduated? Oh, 3 years. I can't help it. It just takes that long. You know, if you start with fixing the seniors, well, you're just not going to. You're not going to get anywhere. It's a long-term proposition. So what's the end game? And does our pre-K committee think they're even going to be around when that happens? When what they're doing contributes? Maybe not. But we are, you're going to hear about this in a minute, tracking that, so we'll be able to point to it and say that they did. So, yeah, it's not really sufficient to just say that, because people do need to know. The public needs to know. The business community needs to know. And so what we have to do is develop a system where we do have that end game clearly defined, but we very carefully and strategically tie a whole set of intermediate and short-term outcomes to the end game so that we can report on this. We're doing these things, and you know what? Even though I can't tell you that these kids that are 10th graders are going to graduate in 3 years, I can do a survey of the teachers, I can do a lot of things, and I can tell you that, well, on a short-term basis, they are more engaged, or their grades are improving. And then intermediate, I can tell you that they've progressed to the higher grades in greater numbers. And that all ties to the end game, which is that they're going to graduate. And we need to track that, and we need to be able to collect data around it and to say that these things, so that there's a little call-out box on page 10 to the left, which I don't remember. It says, if we're not all working on the same goals, then something like that. We shouldn't be doing it. Maybe that's a negative way to say it. But anyway, we have to all be working on the same things no matter who we are in the community. So that's the big idea there. So somebody kind of watch me on the time, right? How am I doing? Let's see, 10. I'm okay? All right. Collective impact. Some of you, how many of you have heard that term? Probably not very many of you. It's a very hot term now, and it means that if we work together collectively and it is focused and strategic and systemic, we will make a bigger impact. That's a term you will hear if you haven't heard it yet. These are things people call us and we call ourselves. When I was at the community college, this was like in the early 90s. No, I was there in the early 90s for sure, but in the early 2000s, the state was forming P20 councils. How many of you have heard of that? No? It's like pre-K through grade 20, all the way through councils around that. So we, instead of creating a new one at the community college, we created it at Alignment Nashville. They were called an intermediary organization. We're called a structure. Have any of you heard of Cradle to Career? Yeah? Okay. A convener for community alignment of strategic goals, a convener for community alignment of existing resources. Now, there are some other organizations that do collective impact. One of the things, and I heard Kathy talk about this, she's talking about realigning the money, the budget, repurposing the money at your district. What about all of those resources and goodwill in the community? And it's all goodwill, it's all good stuff, but if it could be repurposed or even slightly aligned so that it's working in concert with the school district, it can have a bigger impact. So what's happening in other places I have observed in different collective impact models is they're doing the collective impact. They're getting together and working together, but first they're saying, so give us some more money. And so what we have to do first is we have to take what we have and realign it. That's the focus, and that's the reason that what you're about to see, our structure and our process and our principles, the way they're designed are to that end, to realign the existing resources. And the coolest thing, and you'll see this in just a minute, is that, guess what? There are a whole lot more resources in your community that could be contributing than you even can imagine. We call those unusual suspects. So if you set, So if you sat in an office and say that you're an expert in reading and you want to convene organizations around helping all the schools make sure that all kids in third grade reading on grade level, which is the big data point for that now, me, if it were me, I would think I know all the organizations in this community that could contribute to that. I would say, well, reading Success by 6, Read to Succeed, you would name those, and they're all very good. But what happens when you deploy a systematic and strategic way of doing this is, guess what? There are all kinds of other organizations who want to contribute. They just don't know how. And if you give them a way how, they're going to do it. I'll give you an example. There was a character education initiative that was in the summer to this point. This also is the way that we're looking at that whole big gap that Kathy talked about, that with the research from Johns Hopkins. It's really hot now about the loss of traction for kids who come from economically disadvantaged homes. We have to have them be engaged after school in the summer, and so that they don't lose that. Here's how you do it. So there was a character development program that our superintendent for elementary schools wanted to do, and she's the chair of the elementary committee. And so they did what we call an invitation to participate. You'll hear what that is in just a minute. One of the respondents was Marathon Oil Company. Now, if you were sitting in a room somewhere and you said, I want to name all the organizations that are going to help with character education, you would not probably name Marathon Oil Company. Marathon Oil Company in Nashville has a wildlife preserve, and they had figured out a curriculum about caring for animals in the earth and the environment that they tied character traits to. And they had been trying to figure out how to get that in the schools, but they were being shut out. They couldn't figure out how to do it in a systematic and scaled way. And as soon as they saw this is what we need. And I could give you 100 of those examples. It happens every time. So the good news is that you have even more resources than you are aware of at this point. What you need to do is uncover those. Okay, another concept here. One of the fellows that founded Alignment Nashville, he's the founder of an international wellness company. He worked for hospital companies for years, and he realized that we were completely backwards in the way we're dealing with people's health, that we need to focus on wellness, not sickness, and make sure that, we are focused on systemic change rather than fixing sick people. So he started a wellness company. It's called Healthways, and it's an international company. It's very large now. He has a lot of companies now. But he's one of the founders of Alignment. And so the first year that we had Alignment, because we were trying to convince the community to do this, and we didn't even know what we were doing, he and I took 100 people to lunch. I sat through 100 lunches. I know, and heard this same story, so now I feel comfortable to tell it. He said he was a good Catholic boy. He grew up in New York. He was a good Catholic boy, and he heard about Mother Teresa, and she'd go out into the ditch in Calcutta every day and get the broken kids and bring them in and help fix them. And that is something that has to be done, and that's the purest form of charity. It is the purest form of charity. And he said, and I heard that and heard that and heard that, and I thought, I'm just not that good. I can't do that. I have not got the patience. But what I do want to do is I want to make it so that there are no children in the ditch. I want to change things. And so what that is, that's systemic change. That is moving from a mindset of we have to fix each individual child. That's the only way to fix this problem. Because as long as that's our mindset, we're going to have broken children, because something's sending us broken children, right? But if we can fix the system so that kids don't get in the ditch, then we won't have to fix the broken children. So what we have right now in this country is we have a lot of individual service organizations that are focused on that. And they have to be, because we still have broken kids. We can't stop doing that. But what we have to get to is That's top of that stairs, which is systemic change. And we can only do that if we do it together. We have to have ways and methods. We have to change the way we work. The way we're working now ain't working as a community. We have to change the way we work to get there, because we're all still focused on fixing those individual kids. So what we developed, and I did it, I have learned so much in the last 10 years, and I hope this doesn't come off as cocky, because it's not meant to be at all, but, having been in higher ed for 30 years, and I've done a lot of stuff, and I thought I was really smart. And I have learned so much from these business people, but they've learned a lot from me too. So, but it's like, how do you do that? How do you do that at scale? I told you earlier, I really didn't know. So it's taken a while to figure it out. And we don't know that we don't have all the answers now. It's always a work in progress. But if you take individual service organizations, and the first thing you do is get them to align strategically. Everybody's doing the same thing, working toward the same strategies. And then you identify the resources that they have to bring to the table. The next step, you coordinate those resources. Then you get them to collaborate so that they can figure out where they're duplicating and where they're, can share. Then you've got alignment of resources. Then you've realigned all the resources. Then you've got systemic change. And it's not easy to get there, I can tell you. And so we thought, well, how do we get there? We have to build a system to do it. And so that's what I'm going to show you right now. Oh, one more comment about this. Be careful. What happens, I'm struggling with this all the time. Unless people understand this, and a lot of people don't, and you have to kind of really talk the message, they want to put all the money here and all the focus here. And there has to be focus there, but if we don't make any investment up there in making that happen, we're never going to get there. So that's an issue as well. So I've heard a lot about programs. I always hear a lot about programs. We have programs, but alignment itself is a tool. It's a set of tools and ways of working that are just different than the ways we currently work. And these are the tools. There are 4. This is just how we frame it. Principles, a set of principles. Our founder, Tom Segeran, put us all in a room in 2004 and said, we're not leaving until we agree on how we're going to work together. There's some things that are basic that if we don't agree on them, like that we're always going to be transparent, like that all voices are heard, and things like that who we're trying to address as a community. If we don't agree on those things, we're never going to get anywhere. It's one of the principles of his company. He has, and you walk in his buildings, and on the wall it says trust, and there are principles all through there. Structure. And I didn't quite understand the importance of the structure, and the structure that I'm going to give you it's intricate, but that just means it's really well thought out for various reasons. The process is important because it takes us from that individual serving organization focus on one individual, fixing broken individuals, to the systemic change. And you all heard, you may not have caught it, but I was an IT professor, and so I'm going to do this with the technology. And so we built a technology platform early on, and it served us well, but about 3 years ago we decided we need a really advanced portal to tie the collaboration, the planning, the project management, and the tracking and accountability all together. And so we've developed that, and we've just finished it. Got developed in South America. Actually, what I designed was way too expensive, and I was a little depressed because it was going to cost $300,000, and I didn't have that. And fortunately, the International IT Center for Deloitte is in Nashville. They have 1,500 IT employees, and they took it on as almost pro bono and got us hooked in with their South American developers. We ended up having to pay something, but it wasn't that much. So Anyway, that will help us be able to do what I said, tie all of those short-term, intermediate, and to the long-term outcomes. So our principles, I'm not going to go over every one of these. I'm just going to highlight some of them. They are in that annual report, but they're really important. When we work with communities, I was just in Jackson, Mississippi last week working with them. They're doing Alignment Jackson. That's the first time we spent 2 hours on working through these. We used these principles to start with, and then they formulated their own around them. But the outcome of our work is to enable children to be successful. We have to align with the public schools' priorities. We can't make our own priorities. The work is designed to support the school's strategic plan. The work is generational. We need to make ours more specific. In Jackson, they really call me out on that. You mean multiple generations work on this? Well, yeah, they do, but what that really means is it's going to take generations to fix this. It's not going to happen in one generation. It's focused on those who most need support in order to be successful. We're targeting academics, but it's the school. The teachers really know how to teach mostly, and they're getting better at it all the time with great superintendents who are helping them learn and so on. Mostly what we need to do is give them whole children. You know, many of you have heard, I forgot the guy's name, I can't remember it, that wrote the book about the ice cream, the guy that was the CEO of the ice cream company, you know what I'm talking about? And he was, Jamie, what's his name? Vollmer, yeah. I read that book. How many of y'all read that book? So some of you haven't read it, so I'll tell you, he was so critical of the school district for so long. He was the CEO of this ice cream company, and then he went and spoke in a school, and the teacher stood up and said, well, tell me what you do when you get a bad batch of blueberries for your ice cream. Well, we send it back. Well, I rest my case. We can't send these kids back, right? So we want them to achieve academically, but really most of the kids we're having trouble with come from impoverished families, and they don't have the resources and the advantages. And so we have to focus on helping them be as successful as those other children. And it's comprehensive and multifaceted. Then we have 2 pages, which I'm not going to read, of committee principles. The committee principles are how we work together. It's sort of like community agreements, if you've ever done those. It says, when we work together, where every voice is going to be heard and valued, and we're going to leave our individual, Tom Segeran says guns at the door. This really says agendas at the door. It's about, we constantly are reminding our committees, this is about working together. It's not about your agenda. It's not about your organization, etc. You can look at those again. Okay, there's structure. This is really important. That was the principles of that chart, those 4 tools. This is the structure. So I said before, you have all these coalitions that start up, and they do good work, and if they have good leadership, they do really good work. But who are they mostly accountable to? Themselves, usually. And what happens a lot of times with coalitions that start like that, or collaboratives, is that they go on way beyond their usefulness, or they fall apart because leadership falls apart. And so how do we avoid some of those things? And how do we build a structure that ties the highest level stakeholders in the community together with those who are out in the field actually doing the work? So we have a board of directors, or governance board, which is our highest level stakeholders. If you look on our annual report on the front left page flap, on the cover flap on the front left, I'll just run down this list a little bit for you, but on our board of directors is the school superintendent, the chairman of the school board, the president of the Chamber of Commerce, the presidents of all of our universities and community colleges, not all of them, they kind of rotate, but 4 or 5 of them are on there. Presidents of foundations, the community, the United Way president's on there, the Chamber's chairman of the board's on there. You can see that and the mayor, you can see that all of the highest level stakeholders in our community who have a stake in public education or the outcome of our children are on this board. What that means is that we have a very powerful group of people who care about this. It's a distributed power base. Another thing that happens is that when the superintendent changes, guess what? This agenda is going to go on because they're going to hire somebody that's looking at this agenda. I mean, they have the school board people are on it. The mayor, when the mayor changes, guess what? Any new mayor is not going to come in and tell this board, I'm going to take off and go in a different direction. The operating board, I always have to explain this, and it took us a few years to figure out what that is, or figure out that we needed it. It is the people who actually get the work done. Those people that I just named don't really do the work, right? Their purpose is to move the barriers out of the way. The people who really get the work done are those people who are at the next level. And they are the action-oriented leaders. They're the citywide network and a peer accountability network. I was talking about accountability a minute ago, and you see that we have all of these committees, and we've got them grouped together. These are the individual committees. So these like parent, university, refugee, and immigrant. I don't remember what they all are now, because I used to know, but I don't anymore. But school nutrition, adolescent sexual responsibility, all the health committees, grade level committees, pre-K, elementary, middle, and high school. So each of those committees has a chairperson and a vice chair. Here's part of the structure. Those school-focused committees, those grade-level committees, they have to be chaired by a high-level decision-maker in the school district. If they're not chaired by a high-level decision-maker in the school district, what happens is you got a group of people who are meeting every month figuring out what to do, and they've got a plan that nobody can execute. So all of these nuances are really important. The vice chair is a community organization rep, a high-level decision maker in a community organization, and they're content experts. So depending on what they're focused on, that committee's focused on, that's how those people are chosen. And all of these chairs and vice chairs are this operating board. So we have almost 50 people on our operating board, and if you turn to in our annual report to the page on the operating board, and you would see the list of people who are serving on that. This group meets every month, and they have for like 8 years, for an hour and a half, the third Thursday of every month from 8 to 9:30, and we have like 40 people who still show up. Why do they show up? Because it's like a magical time. It is totally magic. When you go into that room and you watch them, and some of you are coming to Nashville in September, and we're going to have an operating board meeting, an actual meeting that's not scripted, that you will observe. And what happens is that now you have a way for the school nutrition committee leaders to intersect with the high school culinary arts academy folks, because because the high school committee chair and vice chair is in that room as well. So the school nutrition committee is making a report about, well, we got a grant from so-and-so, we're sending 30 cafeteria managers to training on how to cook fresh fruits and vegetables. Well, we'd like our culinary arts teachers to go as well. They could help, and we'd like for some of the culinary arts students to go, and then we wrote a grant to take those culinary arts students and have them develop motivational strategies for the kids, their peers in the different schools, on eating better. All of that I just gave you one example. In every meeting, that cross-pollination happens over and over and over again. There has to be an opportunity for that's structured. That's where I think we've made some real gains in teen pregnancy, because you've got, again, the high school committee folks are sitting there beside the adolescent sexual responsibility folks, and they're coming up with strategies, and they're reporting on what they're doing. They say, well, hey, let's talk after, because we're going to get together and do this and join hands on that. So that's where more collective impact occurs. These are they're work groups, they're called committees, but we're changing the terminology to design and implementation teams, because they're actually designing strategies. And if you design something and you hand it off to somebody else to implement, it's probably not going to happen. So we say when they join us, well, are you ready to stay for a while? And they do. And it's pretty phenomenal. Third tool is process. You remember that stair step that I showed you. Well, the question is, how do you go from here to here? Theory's fine. I can give you this theory all day long, but tell me how I get from here to here. How you get from here to here is you have facilitated meetings every month with that structure that I just showed you, and you take them through a process of, number 1, tactical planning, number 2, community engagement, number 3, piloting and evaluation, number 4, scale up, and number 5, institutionalization. Those are very specific steps, and they're designed in a way to take us from point A to point B. They're designed using concepts of business, continuous improvement, coaching, executive coaching, and facilitation. All of those skills are embedded into what this process does. And our staff is trained in all of those things. So tactical planning, that came right out of the business world. I mean, that's Tom Sigeren's word, but there are all kinds of, if any of you are familiar with Wiggins and McTighe backwards design, those of you who are educators, you know, I brought that to the game. And what we had was planning that we used backwards design out of education, but we used the business concepts to build a pattern for how to do this and how to tie it using basic logic modeling from long-term backwards to intermediate into short-term outcomes. But the thing is, you've got 15 to 20 people on a committee in a room every month facilitated, and they're looking at data. They're trying to figure out what is the most important thing we can do for this population group, for the pre-K group. What's the highest priority thing we can do as a community to make sure that these kindergarten kids are successful. If you do that month after month for a few months, what happens is you've applied multiple perspectives to the problem with a systematic process and structure. And first we said, well, you know, if something's not going to work, we're just not going to do it. But what has happened is most everything works because we have all the multiple perspectives. We've taken a systematic process for going from A to B, and then we implement it. But why do we have, what's the difference in that and this? Here's the difference. If you just open up, if you put out a press release and you say, hey, everybody come on this day and help us figure out how to get all the kids ready for kindergarten, you might have 100 people show up. A lot of them be parents. You might have 500 people show up. Tell me how many of you have ever done anything and accomplished a real systematic way of doing it with 100 people in the room. It just does not happen. Research on teaming will tell you that it has to be a small group that does the planning. And I just told you that planning and implementation are tied together, and they are. And so this group is the planning leaders, but then we have something called, they craft an invitation to participate that invites the whole community to come and participate. And they lay out, they don't say in their invitations, oh, I need you to bring tutors. Well, some of them actually do. But we try to get them to frame their work in outcomes so that those agencies who want to bring their work to bear on the problem have an opportunity to bring their best thinking. So that gives them buy-in as well. So it's a two-stage process. If it's a one-stage process, you're not going to get anywhere because you have all these people trying to bring their own agendas. But if you do this two-stage process, then you start to see how it develops over time and how you can engage in levels the whole community around it. It really does work. It's transformational. So now what you have is, instead of on Monday morning with the principal dealing with 10 nonprofits and people at his door saying, I want to help, I want to help, I want to help, you have a group led by high-level people at the district saying, we have designed this. This is what we really need. Can you come help us? It's one agenda, OnePolk. It's one agenda. Come help us do this. We love your goodwill, your intent. This is what we really need your help with. How can you help? And what happens is that they start to realign their resources. So the Country Music Hall of Fame responded to the character education invitation to participate as well. Now, that's another one. You would not have put them on the list. You wouldn't have said, oh, the Country Music Hall of Fame, let's call them and see if they can do some character education. But what they had was an education department that had a little program where they helped kids write songs. So what they said when they saw the invitation from the committee was, oh, you know what? We could shift that so that we give them some ideas about how to write songs that are really focused on specific character traits. And so they didn't really change what they were doing, but they did shift it. In some cases, they've changed it a lot. Like I said, that was another unusual suspect, but I have a lot of those. Okay, so senior citizens. We need to help kids. We don't say we need you to come read to kids. We say we need to help them read better. So Senior Citizens has already got their Friends Learning in Pairs programs. They come in and they read to kids, but they're just reading random things. So if they're working with the character education stuff, they're choosing their books more carefully now. They're tying it in with lessons and not just reading random books. This happens, I mean, I could go on for hours on this. I'm not, but I think you've got the point there. So we pilot everything because we can't really know how well, we have to pilot to learn what parts of it work and what don't. And we bring these community organizations together after they respond to the invitation to participate. We bring them together so that they can collaborate and further refine and reduce duplication. So we bring them together in community meetings and so on. They share, and then they go out and they start the work. Scale up. Everything is systemic and to scale. There's no use in us doing it if we're not going to scale it. We want every child to be successful. And institutionalization. So for us, the Academies of Nashville, which started in the Alignment High School Committee in 2005, is institutionalized. We have little to do with it now. Pencil partners are managed through business partners are managed through the Pencil Foundation. So when you come to the Academy visits, that's what you hear about. You hear about the Chamber, and their CEO champions and those things. But what you don't hear as much about is they're institutionalized. It's working. Partners have now shifted. What you may not know, and those of you who've been to the Academies of Nashville visits, you hear about pencil partners managing these business partners. Before the high school committee defined this strategy, pencil partners were bringing cookies to elementary schools. They still had 600 partners, but that's a prime example of going from doing some good work to doing some good work that's strategic. Now they have a focus, and now they have a real strategic purpose, and it's really institutionalized. Now, what our committee does is look for ways to, you'll see in just a second, look for ways to improve it even more. Okay, these aren't working. So here's the ways that here's the Academies of Nashville. Similar to your Polk Academies, and you guys are really marching forward on that. I mean, you're doing some amazing work around the Academies. Don't know if you can read those. That's kind of, I'm going to get them to fix those slides, but if I go around those circles, these are different alignment committees. Adolescent sexual responsibility, K through 12 college and career, parent engagement, behavioral health, social emotional learning, healthy eating, active living, community achieves, experiential learning, refugee and immigrant support services, pre-K early childhood, school nutrition, middle school project-based learning. Those are all committees that are now supporting the academies. They're not directly creating academies, but they're directly doing things that contribute to the success of those kids in the academies. So that's how it grows from a focus to an exponential result. And we didn't start with all those committees. We started with 4, pre-K, elementary, middle, and high school. It took 5 years to get all of that built out. You can't start there. So I told you a little bit about the platform. It's not a website anymore. This is our final tool. Principle, structure, process, and underpinning it all is the technology. It's a portal that we've custom developed to do this principle, structure, and process. And coming from the background that I came from, I was very insistent that we don't use a canned product because what that does is force you to change your process. And what we're trying to do is force change in a process. If we're trying to force change in a process, we have to have something that supports that. So anyway, this is just sort of what it's a collaboration portal. It's context aware. The cool thing about it is our mayor, which changes every 8 years, maybe every 4 years, he has his own children and youth master plan, of which much of the work is going on in alignment committees. But he wants, because he's the mayor, he sets his own goals, right? So that's okay. That's his job. That's his right, and that's what he does. But we know that when he leaves, the next mayor is going to come in and come up with some different ones maybe, or a different plan. And so the way this thing is set up is that all of the work of all the committees is categorized in categories, and it's all, once the categories are defined, all the mayor's goals are categories, and all of the alignment goals are categories. And so choosing those categories, the person that we call them knowledge harvesters now, that take notes in the meetings, and they take notes online, and they choose those categories that apply, and it crosswalks all the different agendas in the community. So in the end, we have dashboards that have crosswalked it all through a system of categorizations and tagging. So our committees then have online wiki conversations that are tied to the project management system. So they're talking to each other while they're about their projects, and it's all contained on that website, so it's not lost in their email. So at any point in time, they can just go there and see the whole context of the conversation all the way back. And our notes, as I said, our minutes used to be static and just posted. Nobody read the minutes. I mean, if you did read the minutes, some people read the minutes, but if you do, it's like a labor of love because you have to dig through it, right? You know, if you go through minutes, it's like, oh my gosh. So now the minutes are taken in this too, and it's all taken as and categorized so that if you want to know everything that's been talked about in every committee about high school academies, you just do a search on that, and there it is. And it pulls up all of the minutes in the pre-K that we're talking about high school and everything else. So I just said all that. So if you are interested in knowing any more about alignment, there have been a number of articles written. The United States Chamber of Commerce Institute for Competitive Workforce did a case study on what we're doing. Johns Hopkins University Press, Harvard Graduate School of Education focused a case study on us. I did a workshop up there. American Youth Policy Forum, America's Promise Duke University. And we were one of 12 solutions for community collaboration featured in the White House Council for Community Solutions project that was done last year. And those are all online. They're on our website. So we are building a community of practice, a network of communities who are interested in using these principles, structure, process, and technology so that we can all learn together, because what we found from working with Rockford is, they had some great ideas on how to market these ITPs that we hadn't thought of, and every single community is really different. So we're doing that. These are the communities that are part of the network so far. Of course, Nashville, Jackson, Mississippi, Rockford, Illinois. I've got the Ford National on there because Ford National is using the portal. A group of 12 school districts in upstate New York spanning 3 counties, Coachella Valley in California, Southern California, Palm Springs, Palm Beach, and Hawaii is our newest addition, or one of the islands on Hawaii. I haven't been there yet. They're just signed on, so I don't really know what that's going to look like. Okay, I wanted to save some time for questions, and I don't know how my time is. I'm done? Oh, I've got 15 minutes. Okay. I have some more slides on the high school stuff, but I've kind of talked mostly about it because I know that you're very interested in that. But I wanted to give you the big picture, so I'm going to stop, and if you don't have a lot of questions, then I'll go share those, but I want to answer questions too. So I'm going to stop for a minute and see if you have questions. And do we have a microphone for, no, I can hand it? There's another one here.
All right. Questions?
You usually have questions, so hopefully you'll have some questions.
Who's the first one?
With your experience, how do you keep the agenda, the personal agenda, from small groups, from totally disbanding what you're trying to do?
Right, a very good question. When those groups meet, they meet every month, our staff, there's a staff person from alignment who, like in the beginning, the first year it was me, myself, and I went from being over 3 campuses and having 400 employees to me. And I went into those meetings and facilitated it using coaching and facilitation strategies. So what we have now is 4 staff people who do that. Every meeting is facilitated. So So they know they know how to do that. They know how to make sure that all voices are heard and that no one takes over their agenda. Now, to your point, sometimes something gets through, because here's how it got through one time. This is the only time it's happened. We had a committee working on college and career readiness, and the chairman or the vice chairman of that committee was running one of the nonprofits, and he was trying to get a $250,000 grant for his organization. So he ramrodded a tactical plan and an ITP through that if it went through and we put it out to the community, basically it would help his organization and nobody else's. When he took, that's another thing about operating board. When I say it's a peer accountability network, they have to take their plans there to be approved. When he took that, well, first of all, my staff came to me and said, "Oh, Sydney, I don't know what we're going to do. I can't stop it. You know, he's just pushy and he's going to make this happen." I said, "You know what? Let's just test the process and see if it works. Let it go. We know it's going to work. We knew it was going to work because we'd already had operating board. They ate him alive. We didn't have to do it." Because there are 50 people in the room and they're all abiding by the process, and so it might get past the first, but that's where you really hit the rubber meets the road in terms of accountability. Great question, thank you.
Sydney, first of all, on behalf of this entire room, you have blown us away, and we are all feeling like slackers that we haven't, done this program before ourselves. But my question would be, you don't have to drill down too deep, but how do you fund and sustain this program?
Great question. That is a great question. I get it asked it all the time. I should have addressed it. Well, in the beginning when we started, no one had ever done it before, and so it was a high risk, because like I said, I didn't know how to do it. Nobody knew how to do it, or if they had, I can say nobody had done it, but we didn't know of that they did. So we had some very forward-thinking philanthropists, the men who started this actually in deep pockets, and they paid for it the first 2 years, personally. And then we started getting interest from the foundations, and they started funding us. And then we came up with, once we had some successes, what our strategy was we need to create a funding mechanism that is solid, that represents all the stakeholder groups. So now basically it's a third from the city, a third from the school district, and a third from the business community. And it's a relatively small budget, about $500,000 with all of our staff and everything, as large as we've gotten now. So, and we get, it's really that they provide about $400,000. We get another $100,000 from the hospitals to help with the Children's Health Initiative. And that has been worked into the budget. We didn't ask for that until they could see the value proposition. And once they saw the value proposition, it was like, And what we don't want to do is we don't do any fundraisers, and I don't go ask for money except from these sets of people that have committed to the long term, simply because we would then be competing with those organizations we're trying to align, and that compromises our position.
Okay, question.
Hi, Sydney. This is a framework question.
Go closer.
Closer. So nobody wants to have to reinvent the wheel, and you've got a great model. However, there are also other frameworks for educational, closer, alignment that exist in Florida. There are other communities of excellence. So how important do you think it is for our county to either adapt a model such as yours or maybe another framework that's available to us versus the investment and the buy-in of creating our own? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I think so. I mean,
Thanks.
That's totally up to you and your community. That's one of the things, the major points that I make with communities is we're not here selling our framework to you. We're only helping communities who ask for it to help them. If your community decides you want to do your own, you should do that for sure. Personally, what I've seen in the communities that we have helped is they save about 4 years by, just adapting what we've already done, because a lot of this stuff we had to figure out. It took us forever. But you may come up with some kind of really great idea that we could steal, I don't know. So, that's really up to your community, and there are other models, but I don't know of any that have an actual tool set for making it happen. I know a lot of them have theories, but I don't know everything either. So that's how I would answer that. I think that it's up to you, and it's not, like I said, it's not a program, it's just a set of tools, a way of doing things, and a way of working. So whatever you all decide as a community is. And in fact, this afternoon, I'm going to be facilitating a planning time around that, and you will be able to say what you want, and whatever you come out with as a community is what you should do. We have, and this is one of the slides I didn't put up, but I am on the national team with Ford. There are 8 of us on the national team, and you know about the 3 strands. And the strand 3, really, we're promoting the alignment model as a good way to do strand 3, just like we promote academies as a good way to do strand 2. But there may be other ways to do strand 2. There are, and we promote, Ford Pass. The curriculum is we call them the practice models. So the practice model for strand 1 is really Ford Pass. The practice model for strand 2 is really academies. The practice model for strand 3 is really alignment. However, everybody should be open to improved practice models, whatever they might be. So I'm here today on Ford's dime because they want for the Ford NGL communities to hear about this. And then what you do with that is up to you. And this is a good time for me to introduce the Ford team that's here with me. You know Tom Besaw, but Tom, could you stand again? Tom's on the national team with me, and he actually is here in Florida. And then we have Dr. Jill White, and she is from the University of West Florida, and she is the co-director of the Ford Hub, Regional Hub, and Jennifer Edge, her colleague, and she's also from the university, but they co-direct the Hub, Ford Professional Development Hub, and they have worked all over Florida, I think here some, and are really a part of what we call our National Leadership Council. We have a 35-person leadership council across the country to help deploy this all around, and all of those folks are part of that. You'll be seeing some more from them this afternoon. Any other questions? We out of time? Is that you, John?
And I'll add that council, we do have a representative from Polk County, Doug Lockwood from Winter Haven is on that council.
Doug's on it, yeah. Great member of the leadership council.
So if that doesn't light your wood's wet, right? There's a guy on local radio sports show host that always says that. All right. Thank you, Sydney.